Comparing fractions, percents, and decimals. Okay, everything that we're doing here, we want to be able to make sense of the math that we're working with. The model that we have here, we have one whole unit that's divided into 4 equal parts. As we've got represented here, 1 out of 4 is shaded. This can also be, another way to represent this would be 25%. Again, using the money value, the money concept, think of this as $1, and of the $1, one portion of the equal parts of the dollar is shaded, which would be equal to 25 cents or 25%. Now 25% indicates parts of 100. So 25 would indicate out of 100 equal units, 25 of those parts are shaded. So we have 25%. The decimal 0.25 can be easily derived from dividing the numerator by the denominator, 4 into 1. Another way to derive 0.25. So all these 3 figures represent the same item up here. 1/4, 25%, 0.25. These are all equivalent, and they all show this. This is representative of this. Now, fraction to a percent. Let's look at how to convert a fraction to a percent. All we need to do in this case, as we mentioned before, is to divide the denominator into the numerator, which we can do with no problem. 1 and 4. Well, 4 will not divide into 1, so let's add a decimal point, 0. 4 will divide into 10 2 times. 2 times 4 is 8. Let us subtract, and we end up with 2. 0, and bring down our 0. 4 will divide into 20 5 times. Here's our decimal point. 5 times 4 is 20. Let us subtract, and we have 0. So 1/4 is equal to 0.25. Now, using our rule, 0.25, let's convert this decimal to a percent, and that's nothing more than moving our decimal point over 2 places to the right, and in doing so, this would be equal to 25%. So 1/4 is equal to 0.25, which in turn is equal to 25%. A very simple way to change a fraction to a percent. Now let's look at changing a fraction to a decimal. Again, very simple, which we modeled up here, and we came up with 0.25. So we know that 1/4 is equal to 0.25, or 25 hundredths. Next, changing a percent to a fraction. This is very simple to do. We know that 25% is the same as 25 over 100. So 25 over 100. Let's ask ourselves, can we reduce that? And we know that 25 and 100, they have a common factor. The greatest common factor would be 25. So let's divide both the numerator and the denominator by 25. 25 divided by 25, of course, is equal to 1. 100 divided by 25 is equal to 4. So we know that 25% is equal to 1/4. A very simple way to convert a percent to a fraction. Percent to a decimal, again, very simple. Changing 25% to a decimal, we can either divide or just simply move the decimal point 2 places over to the left. So in doing so, 25% becomes 0.25. Decimal point to a percent. Again, just the opposite of changing the percent to a decimal. We can either multiply by 100 or simply move the decimal point 2 places over to the right. So this would then become 25%. Very simple to do. A decimal point to a fraction. Again, remembering all the rules that we've been working with, 0.25 is equal to 25 over 100, or 25%. So in reducing 25 over 100, we know they do have a common factor. The greatest common factor is 25. So 25 divided by 25 would be equal to 1, and 100 divided by 25 would be equal to 4. So we know that 1/4 is equivalent to 0.25. So these are very easy to know and to understand and to make sense of. We have a model here to review, and 1/4 again would represent one section of the 4 equal parts, which is equivalent to 25%, which is equal to 0.25. So if ever you're confused, make a model, make a picture, make a diagram to help you better understand what is it that we're studying or learning at the time.
A common question would be, why do we use fractions, decimals, and percent if they're all interrelated? The reason why it is sometimes convenient to use percent, sometimes decimals, and sometimes fractions. It depends on the circumstance. For instance, if the bank is offering 6.5% interest, that's a very convenient number to use, 6.5%. If they said fraction, it's 13/200th, that'd be kind of awkward, wouldn't it? The bank is offering 13/200ths interest rate for your CD. It's much more convenient to say 6.5%. Or they could say 0.065, but they don't do that. So it's a matter of convenience many times whether you use fractions, decimals, or percent. Now, for instance, we'll take here a ruler. This is a common ruler. This is a 12-inch ruler. And that uses fractions. 1 inch, 2 inches, 3 inches, or 1 1/4, 1 1/2, or come over here, 16.5 inches. A ruler uses fractions. We have a large ruler, also a tape measure, fractions. It has inches, and then it has 1/8, 1/16. This goes down to 1/16. Precision rulers, they often also go down to a 64th. Now we have another problem. Some equipment only uses decimals. We take these micrometers. They only read in decimals. Here's another one. And so when you use a micrometer, or a lot of machines, they only read decimals. So you have to take whatever number you have, your fraction, you have to convert it into a decimal. Here's a little gauge over here. This will measure, but notice what it says in this gauge over here. It says over here 3/8 to 1 3/8. So it goes from 3/8 here to 1 3/8. But notice the increments. It says 0.001. That's a decimal. So these numbers around this dial are in decimals, but they read the gauge here as a fraction from 3/8 to inch 3/8. Now they could say 0.375 to 1.375, but they'd rather use a fraction. We have wall charts. And we have fractions here. Notice, over here, 3/16, 0.1875, 13/64, 0.2031. Here down over here, 1/4 inch, 0.250. We have then, you come over here to 5/16 inch, 0.3125. Here's 3/8 inch, 0.375. Half inch is 0.5, and the zeros after it doesn't mean anything. It's actually 0.5. But then this chart also converts millimeters. If you have 5 millimeter, it equals, it just goes to 4 decimal places, 0.1969, and we can go on. And so we have these decimal equivalents, that's what this chart says here, decimal equivalents, for millimeter and fractions. So a person working in a machine shop or a garage or wherever they use these kind of measurements could just look up in the chart and get the measurements. So you can see they're related. Fractions, decimals, and percent are related. Here we can see the relationship between a fraction and a decimal. And also we learn through the lessons, sometimes it's convenient to use percent. Sometimes it's useful to use a fraction. Sometimes you have to use a decimal if you're working on machines. So there's all different ways of using fractions and percent. Here's an interesting one. This is a dial caliper. And over here, notice the dial. That's all in decimals. It does not work in fractions. So we hope now that you understand why it is important to know fractions, decimals, and percents. Now keep up the good work. you're learning the applications for decimals, fractions, and percent. After completing these 2 pages, take the test, and again, don't forget, double-check your work. We have provided double-check and triple-check additional helps and tests. Use them to help you master this unit.
Please work the problems and take the test in your workbook. Number success, the practical way to learn.